My name is Marisa Gomez. I'm the Public Programs Manager for the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History, and I'm really excited to welcome you all here tonight for this opening reception, as we're calling it, for the annual exhibit, The Art of Nature. I'm a part of the exhibits team who put this thing all together, and I'm also joined tonight by other members of that team, as well as a few of the artists featured in this year's show, and they're all here with me now. But before I invite them in and introduce them, I just wanted to take care of just a bit of housekeeping tonight. So first off, this program is being recorded and we will upload it to our website shortly. And your microphone again has been disabled, but you can communicate with us using the chat. So I thought we could get started by practicing with that by just doing some introductions. So share what brought you here tonight. Are you a featured artist, a museum member, a lover of art? And, you know, we would really love to be having this as one of our world famous museum exhibit opening receptions on site, with everyone mingling with each other and admiring the art on the walls. But for now, we're going to do our best with what we got. And again, it's lovely to be able to see your faces. So if you would like to have your video on, please feel free. And just take a moment to say hi in the chat and introduce yourself. And another thing I wanted to do is acknowledge that the land on which the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History resides is the traditional and unceded territory of the Yupi tribe of the Awaswas Nation. Today, these lands are stewarded by the Amamutsan tribal band, who are working hard to fulfill their obligation to Creator, to care for and steward Mother Earth and all living things through relearning efforts and the Amamutsan Land Trust. And members of the Land Trust are featured here in this image. All right, so tonight we are celebrating the return of our beloved annual exhibit, The Art of Nature. And for the first year ever, we are presenting the exhibit both on site at the museum with the original works of art, as well as online in the form of a virtual exhibit, which is very exciting. And the reason we're able to do this is because we are reopening tomorrow after over a year of having our doors closed. Members are invited to visit the museum 11 to 3 beginning Saturday, April 10th for a week of member days. We're closed on Mondays. We will then open to the general public on Saturday, April 17th. And you can just pop on by or make an appointment to ensure that you that we aren't at capacity when you arrive. And when you do arrive, you'll be treated to a selection of beautiful science illustration on the walls. So on that note, I want to introduce the rest of our panel tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have yourself in like gallery view, you can see all of us and all of the people who are joining in tonight too. So that's maybe a good call rather than speaker view. And that's just at the top of your Zoom screen. There's a button called View, and you click on it and you click Gallery. If you'd rather not see a bunch of tiny faces and only see one big face, then you can do the other version. All these little tricks we've learned over this past year. So I'm going to introduce the rest of the team. And that is our exhibits team of staff. So in addition to myself, we have Liz Broughton, our visitor services manager. So Liz, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here.
Hello. And then our other staff member here tonight is our executive director, Felicia Van Stolk.
Hello, everyone.
And then another member of the exhibits team is our artist curator, Gnekow.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight.
And then we also have with us another artist featured in the show, which is Sammy Chang. And she is our featured artist on the poster this year, which is always a really great honor. And we're very pleased to have you, Sammy.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all.
Great. So this is our crew for the night, and we are going to be sharing some pictures with you, some images, don't worry. And we're also just going to get started with a bit of background on the exhibit from the woman who has been behind it all for the past decade, Liz Broughton. So why don't you take it away, Liz?
Again, I think I speak for everyone when I say I wish you were all in this room here with me right now, sipping on a glass of wine, looking at some art with me. But hopefully in the days and weeks to come, some of you can come out here and see it. But I'll get this party started with some visual aids, which my spiel does not usually get to have visual aids. So that is a positive this year. All right.
Except for the visual aids on the walls behind you.
Yeah. Yes. There's that. Thanks, Marisa, for ruining that clever joke. Anyway, so this is our 33rd year of exhibiting science illustration here at the museum, and I just wanted to start out by reflecting on the origins of the exhibit. And I'm sure there are some folks out there who remember it in its earliest days. So maybe give us a little thumbs up if you recognize some of these posters, or if you've been coming to this exhibit for 10 plus years. I know there's probably some of you out there. So as you can see here, this exhibit began under the title Illustrating Nature and was originally the culminating project for students at UCSC's Scientific Illustration Program. Now, that program moved to CSU Monterey Bay around 2009, so you can now see the students' final project exhibit at the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History, and they usually open theirs about a month after ours. So if you find yourself down south and are in need of some more science illustration, definitely check that exhibit out. And as we fast forward to 2010, we knew how much our community really loved seeing science illustration here every spring, and we decided we wanted to keep the exhibit going, but under a new title, The Art of Nature, and open up submissions to a wider audience beyond just students. And so you can see this here is our first poster in 2010 under the new name, The Art of Nature. And I can confidently say to this day, it continues to be our most popular exhibit amongst the community each year. So that's why we are excited. We get to keep doing it in the midst of pandemics and all sorts of other fun global events. And this year, our exhibit represents the work of 30 different artists from the greater San Francisco and Monterey Bay areas. And I highly recommend you check out our artist website on our website, and you can learn more about the artists and their backgrounds. You can follow them on social media, you can visit their websites and support them in a number of ways. And if you're an exhibiting artist out there tuning in, just again, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for being a part of our exhibit and sharing your artwork with us. We definitely couldn't do it without you. So with that, I will also shamelessly plug that we have a wide array of cards, prints, stickers, and more available from these artists in the exhibit. And you can find a selection of fun goods in our online store and even more in our physical gift shop here at the museum. So plan to do some shopping. It's a great way to support the museum and these artists at the same time. Perfect time to stock up on thank you cards and get some art for your walls and or empty water bottles. It's always a good time in the gift shop this time of year. So many of the artists in our show since its rebranding back in 2010 have been alums of UCSC and or CSUMB's program, including Sammy Chang, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later, and also Megan, who has been a guest curator of this exhibit for quite some time, or at least I think almost as long as I've been here. And she was also the 2019 recipient of our Laura Heacox Naturalist Award. And as you can see here from these images, we love partnering with her. And I had fun diving into our photo drive to find all these images. Apologies, Megan. But the reason for your face is that I would love to learn sort of about what your impressions are of the history of this exhibit and what you've seen over the years and the changes.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so I was a student in the science illustration program. The last year it was at UC Santa Cruz. So my graduation show was the last Illustrating Nature show. Museum. And then the next year, the museum approached the California California chapter of the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators to say, hey, you know, we'd really like to continue the exhibit. How can we do that? And so we reached out to the chapter and to other local, you know, illustrators that we knew to elicit submissions. And it was just really exciting to be able to include alumni and other folks that we knew through the science illustration community. And so, yeah, so it was a great way to continue the relationship with the museum and with the community. And there's so many folks who are such huge supporters of the arts and of the scientific community here that it just seemed like a really natural continuation. And so the show's really grown over the last 10 years. It's really exciting to see so many, you know, students, so many recent alums from the now CSUMB program joining us. And it's just, yeah, it just feels really exciting to be able to continue the work that we've built. And I'm just thrilled that the museum continues to support science illustrators and give us an opportunity to show in a venue that is really a great fit. But it, you know, we just, as illustrators, we often don't have an opportunity to exhibit our work outside of, you know, wherever it lives in terms of, you know, whether it's an interpretive sign or in a textbook or on a website or whatever. So it's just an exciting opportunity. So it's been a great decade, and I'm really looking forward to our future. So thanks, Liz.
Well, I think I can say similarly, we are just so truly lucky that we are surrounded by so many talented illustrators. I think they're probably concentrated in our area due to the certificate program. So it's us who are the fortunate ones. But thanks, Megan. Now, as we dive into this year's exhibit, I've had the pleasure of being a part of the curation of this exhibit for 10 years now, which is a lot. But every year I'm continually astounded by the talent of our local artists. I'm inspired by their depictions of nature. And I think my favorite part of this exhibit is that I always learn something new, something about a species, a habitat, or a process. I think that's kind of the beauty of this marriage of art and science. And as you may know, last year, unfortunately, we weren't able to exhibit a show in our physical space given the lockdown, which happened literally the week before we were getting ready to install. But this year, we are so happy that we're going to be reopening our doors with the debut of this beloved exhibit. And I'm also very excited to welcome visitors back to see this artwork in person. But in addition to that, we have also created a virtual version of this exhibit so that we can continue to reach fans of science illustration, both near and far. And actually, the online exhibit contains even more images than the exhibit in person. So I highly encourage you to explore the virtual show, even if you are fortunate to come out here and see the personal one or the one in person. You will get a slightly different experience between the two. So it's 2 exhibits for the price of 1. Now, every year when confronted with selecting pieces for the show, I'm always reminded of the long history of this art form. And it really, from its beginnings when humans were painting cave walls 30,000 years ago, to early depictions of plants in medieval medical texts, to Audubon's famous plates of birds of America. It's been around for a while. And I really feel that the need to use art to make sense of and try to understand the natural world around us is and has been an integral part of human culture for millennia. And we here at the museum are just so proud to be able to continue to highlight this incredible art form. And if you are intrigued by the history of this field and want to learn more about the history of science illustration, you can actually watch a recording of a great lecture that Andrea Dingledine, the artist you see here, gave last year for us. If you have a free hour and want to tune in, it's got some great information. Andrea's a great teacher. You can find it as part of our virtual exhibit. So check that one out. And then whenever I'm introducing the topic of science illustration to school groups or those who may be new to the art form, I always ask them, why is art like this still relevant in an era when we have photographs and other advanced technology to image things? And I think one answer to that question, I think there's many answers, but one answer is that science illustration can show us details that aren't apparent to the camera or the naked eye. So take, for example, some of these botanic illustrations. You can see parts of the plant that exist beneath the soil, or parts of the plant that exist at different times in its life cycle. And these pieces of art can communicate far more about the natural history of a species than a still photograph could, which is pretty darn powerful. Now, I also especially love how much detail can be seen in this artwork and the time that must go into studying a subject. So when it comes to specimens collected in nature, like the nests and the feathers you see here, or even those you might see in a museum, an artist kind of has that luxury of time for close observation and study, as opposed to, say, a quicker sketch you might do in the field. And I love these two pieces from Sandra and Elizabeth. The more you look at them, the more detail you notice. And it's just mind-boggling how much detail is in there. So these are definitely two pieces. If you get a chance to see them up close, you're going to notice a lot. So please definitely check those out. Now, if you've ever owned a field guide, you know illustrations are important tools for the identification of species. For all you birders out there, consider, where would we be without illustrated field guides that depict those key features and coloration? Like, I, for one, am terrible at birding by sound. So I would be, lost without those who came before me illustrating the myriad of birds that exist out there. Otherwise, yeah, I would never learn my tiny songbirds without illustrated field guides. That is for sure. And if you are I will go back. If you are a fan of ornithology, you're, I think, gonna really appreciate this exhibit. We have a really great selection of birds this year, ranging from a tiny Allen's hummingbird to this great blue heron you see here. So great selection of birds this year for all you birders out there. I know there's a lot of you, especially you, Spencer. And I also really love that there is no one correct style or medium that must be used for science illustration. So here we have two depictions of a kingfisher, both totally different in their styles and choice of medium. The one on the left here by Stephanie is an aquatint etching, and the one by Kathy is watercolor. But they are both stunning and accurate illustrations of this species. And if you come visit the museum, we actually have a kingfisher in our wetlands case, so you can compare and contrast all three. A beautiful kingfisher time you can have here at the museum. Now, this is also the first year we've had multiple printmakers in the exhibit. And while this medium might not be the first that comes to mind when we think of science illustration, both of these pieces really beautifully use their medium to communicate with the viewer. So Molly's piece here on the left exhibits that wonderful behavior of possums carrying their young on their back. And Laura's piece really cleverly uses fruits and vegetables to show the size of a human baby in every week of its development, which is just so fun and gorgeous. This is a really huge piece. So if you get a chance to see it in person, it's gonna be way more awesome than the virtual version, but both super fun. Now, being so close to the ocean, many of our artists are inspired by the myriad creatures, great and small, that live in this nearby habitat. And we here at the museum are huge nerds for nudibranchs, like this one from Julia Beery. And while it's not always easy to spot these tiny sea slugs out in nature, artwork like this can really bring to life some amazing species in vivid detail, like Julia has. And this is actually one of a handful of pieces in the show that is only on view in the virtual exhibit. So again, even if you do visit us in person, I highly recommend you check out the online gallery as well. You will definitely see some special stuff in there. And now that we are diving into ocean artwork, I'd actually love to hear more from Sammy Chang, whose artwork graces our poster this year, and who is also a self-professed fan of all things marine. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let her take control.
All right, hello everyone. Let me make sure I share my screen. Like Marisa and Liz said, my name is Sammy, and I am honored to be a part of the show with so many amazing illustrators this year. Tonight, I'm just going to share a little journey into my science illustration career. And yeah, so let's go ahead and dive in. So I was born and raised in the East San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up with a notebook and a pencil in my hand, going everywhere and drawing everything. I earned my bachelor's degree in marine science with a minor in visual and public art at Cal State Monterey Bay. And then this past year, I earned my certification in science illustration. And so for me, growing up, I was always into ocean life as well as drawing and coloring. I was seriously like using whatever crayons I could get my hands on and turning everything into a canvas. Unfortunately, my parents' walls are repainted, so my artwork is not there anymore, but that's okay. That love and passion kind of grew as I, got older, and in high school, I only took natural science and art classes as my electives, and I still kind of just focused more on like ocean and nautical themed illustrations. While I was at CSUMB earning my bachelor's degree, I took a few science illustration courses offered by the program to the public in the summer. And, through that, I just fell more in love with science illustration as like a career. And I knew that this was, kind of my calling. Like this was like my mark and purpose in the world. And so with that being said, why science illustration? Like I mentioned before, I've always really loved art and sciences. Going into CSUMB for my undergrad career, I initially wanted to go into research, but halfway through, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to spend a lot of my life or, a lot of my working career in a lab or collecting and analyzing data. And I would much rather be helping the scientists communicate what they're finding and what they're, looking for to broad audiences. And what better way to do that than visually through illustrations and art and, bright colors and fun curvy lines to just kind of show everyone, what the natural world has to offer. And so, like I mentioned before, I did just earn my certification in December. So I'm pretty fresh in the field of science illustration. But like I'm sure a lot of the other illustrators in this gallery will, relate to, I love it because I'm learning new things every day. And I feel like, whether it's like a new art technique or using a new medium or learning about, the mice that run around in the fields of Florida, like I feel like I'm learning something new every day. What I also really love about this career is that I have the freedom to work basically anywhere. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I've been working from my house, but it's been really cool to say that, from my little home in the East Bay, I've been working on projects anywhere from Hawaii to Seattle to Florida. So it's been really cool to say that I've been working all over the country from one spot. Another thing I really love about being a science illustrator is that I have the ability to work on different types of projects. And so though my career so far hasn't been, it's been pretty short, I've been able to work on projects like interpretive panels for hiking trails. I've done digital content for museum education outreach programs. I've helped illustrate children's books, and I've even helped design logos for some of my favorite small businesses. So going into mediums that I really like, I'm kind of all over the place. I don't really stick to one. I kind of like to test out new things, but I guess I would say traditionally, I really like to use graphite and pen and ink. And then for color, I like to use watercolor and acrylic. Digitally, I like Photoshop, but lately I have been using a lot of Adobe Illustrator just because I've been getting really clean lines, which is just really satisfying. And it has a nice it's a nice graphic approach to science illustration and communication. So going into the pieces that I have in the show this year, as you can tell, I really love the ocean, especially Monterey Bay. I was fortunate enough to live there for 6 years before moving back to the East Bay, and I learned so much from, my studies and just like being a part of the community. And so going into my pieces, this one, which I'm sure you've all might have seen, is my Frenzy Friends. And what I wanted to show in this piece is that this little like Pacific sardine, schools of it can feed like really big marine macrofauna. And, a whole school of fish can be consumed in like a matter of minutes by like humpback whales, and whatever the humpback whales don't eat, the leftovers go to the sea lions and even the seabirds that kind of fight and clash over them. And so I think, it's like a really dynamic piece that, the scene you can only really see like if you're out there whale watching, and not everyone has the luxury to do that. So I wanted to bring a little bit of whale watching to everyone. My second piece is Battle Scars. And so it depicts the Rizos dolphin, which is a dolphin that I had never even imagined until I moved to Monterey Bay and went on a whale watching trip and saw them. And I just think they're so cool. One of the deckhands that I went whale watching with, he said they're kind of like the gangsters of the sea. And so I think, after reading more about them, they're just so fascinating. Like they're born with like a clean slate and, no markings whatsoever. And over the course of their lives, they'll kind of collect all these scars, either from their prey, which is squid, or from each other from like playing or fighting. And so, they kind of wear them like really proudly, and they just kind of go about the ocean, like showing how tough they are. And, I really wanted to depict how cool these dolphins are. And like I said, I had never seen them before, and I'm sure a lot of other people might not have seen these dolphins before. And my last piece in the show is probably like one of my favorites of all time. I mean, they're all my favorites, but this one I'm extremely proud of. It is my kelp home fast piece. And I would say, like, unless you're a diver, you wouldn't necessarily know that this entire structure is one organism of giant kelp. I feel like usually if you're on the beach, you will find, especially after a storm, you'll just find like racks of them, but you won't necessarily see how they interact underwater. And so I really wanted to highlight the holdfast, especially, which are all those like really crazy like squiggles that kind of are root-like structures for the organism. And so they like cling down to the rocky reefs. And, not only is their purpose to hang on to the rocks for the kelp to grow, they actually turn into a home, a shelter, and even food for a lot of the other little vertebrates and invertebrates like hanging around. And so, yeah, hopefully if you are able to see it in person, you can see like how cool like these little holdfasts are and how incredibly they work. And so with that being said, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a part of this gallery, whether in person or virtually. Every artist in here is like completely incredible. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. You can find all of Sammy's pieces strategically located next to our tide pool exhibit if you are looking for it. So with that, I will pick back up where we left off in our presentation as we go from the ocean to a little bit further inland. So as Sammy touched on, communicating science really is at the heart of this art form. And our eyes appreciate the aesthetics of the artwork, but it's the details, the depictions of relationships, behaviors, and adaptations are what can make this artwork really special. And this piece from Quentin Freeman is chock full of different species that inhabit the redwood ecosystem. And again, this is one of those pieces that if you can, I definitely encourage you to view it up close, because there's so many things packed in here. There's also posters available in the gift shop if you want to take it home with you and you're a fan of redwoods. And then that being said, another one of my favorite depictions of ecosystem relationships has to be this series from Megan. And so Megan, did you maybe want to share with us some of your insights and thoughts about the pieces in the show this year, or this series in general?
Sure. It just happened that this series, I had been working on a series focused on the Santa Cruz Mountains. And it just happened that I was kind of right at the point where I was ready to get started with all the illustrations when the pandemic started. And I was kind of, I relocated away from Santa Cruz. And so it was just like this really fantastic timing for me to be able to really reflect on the time I've been able to spend in the mountains and all of the just different incredible little habitat relationships and ecological relationships that kind of exist there and not really anywhere else. So banana slugs, of course, are kind of one of our, our most charismatic and best known creatures and inhabitants of the redwood forests, and the Pacific giant salamander. So this is the image on the left. The Pacific giant salamander is its only known predator, which I just think is amazing. And students, UCSC students, have a meme about like the salamander eating the banana slug when the quarter is getting hard. And, one of my kind of all-time favorite experiences of being in that forest is hearing the hermit thrushes singing. They just have a really beautiful kind of fluty song. So, and the azaleas, and of course this year the fetid adder's tongue, which are those kind of the two-leaved and two-flowered plants there, are just having a really bumper year, which is really exciting to see. You don't see them every year. So and so just and then the other one is really about kind of like the grassland habitat in the mountains with foxes and long-tailed weasels and meadow voles and white-tailed kites. And then the butterfly is the golden hair streak, which is the host plant is the giant chinkapin, which is what it's right next to in the image. So I'm really interested in kind of endangered species or threatened species and how they fit into their ecosystems. I think we think about protecting charismatic species, right? Sea otters and wolves and grizzly bears and, big megafauna and that kind of thing. But I think we often don't realize that in order that, bringing a species back from extinction or protecting an individual species is not really enough, right? That they really need a healthy habitat, and that includes all of these organisms. And so this whole series is kind of inspired by that, and maybe helping to visualize like how things fit into their place, right? That they're not isolated, and often where they live can't be replaced if it's lost. So so these are watercolors with pen and ink, and they're all on full-size sheets of watercolor paper, so they're like 24 inches wide, most of them, and then variable sizes in the other direction, but yeah, big pieces, and they're really fun to do, and they're fun to, I think, for folks to kind of look at and learn about the organisms.
Sure. So, yeah. As a resident of the Santa Cruz Mountains, I will say the selection for this year definitely speaks to me. And do you have a Sandhills one in the works or done, or?
I do. Yep. The Sandhills one is done. And I think if you don't have prints, please let me know and I'll bring you some. And I also just finished one about the Ohlone tiger beetle, which also only lives in Santa Cruz Mountains. And I think I was painting that as the fires were burning in the fall and just kind of like worrying about the Beatles, and they're, like they're in such limited places. And I was just kind of, that was like my meditative, like, okay, I really want them to be okay. And I'm going to like memorialize my experience of being in those open meadows in the, around the mountains. So yeah.
Man, yeah, lovely as always.
Thank you.
We are lucky to have them in the show. Yes, prints available in the gift shop. Check it out. So jumping off of that, I would just say, think about where out there you've seen science illustration recently. Maybe it was at a park or in a mural, in a magazine or a book, a children's book even, or maybe even in a museum or a zoo or an aquarium. So science illustration really continues to be an important tool for teaching us about different species or complex processes and concepts. And it can really bring to life species that are extinct even. There's a whole slew of paleontological artists out there. Man, if we ever had some of those submitted one year, man, I'd be excited. So that's something you can't do with a photograph and you can only do with illustration, right? And it can also illuminate species that are, hard to see in full, kind of like Sammy mentioned with her kelp. Similarly, yeah, especially with things that live underwater, so very rarely do we see them in full. But you can see Logan Parsons did that beautifully here with some whales. So another great strength of science illustration. Now, scientists also depend upon art to visualize their data. And this visualization can come in many forms, from the more graphic to the artistic. And here UCSC's Dr. Juniper Harrower, who is both an ecologist and an artist, uses her data to inform her depiction of the relationship between Joshua tree roots and mycorrhizal fungi. And I believe she will also be leading a program for us in May about this fascinating topic, and I'm sure delve into way more detail. So be sure to check that one out. I'm sure Marisa will do a plug for all related programming.
You know it.
Yeah, and if you are fascinated like we are by the visualization of data, there's, again, a really great recorded program from Jen Christensen of Scientific America from last year that's on our website that it really delves into the whole field of data visualization. And wow, it is way more complex than I ever realized.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and just say that one of those posters that you chose for your intro slide of like past exhibits, the one in the center with the moon, was actually, that was one of Jen's pieces from when she went through the science illustration program when it was back at UC Santa Cruz too.
Funny. I think we all tried to steal copies of that poster.
We love the moon.
Moon and the ammonite. I love the ammonites, but you can have the moon. That is cool too. So yeah, it's crucial to current science too, which I think is great. Now, I can honestly say this is the first year we've also included artwork where human skin is the canvas of choice. So Yvonne Byers is a talented artist whose more traditional pieces have been in our exhibit before, but she is also an incredibly skilled tattooist. And here you can see her progression of sketching and illustrating before eventually placing this stunning botanical piece on her friend's arm. Now, if you visit the exhibit in person, you will be able to see some of the unique tools that Yvonne uses to apply her work. And I think she will be joining us also for our June Makers Market and maybe doing something of the tattoo variety as a tease. So very different, maybe not what you would expect when you think of science illustration. But yeah, there's probably a lot of people out there with scientific illustration tattoos. I think there's probably some in the room right now. Maybe give us a little heart or a thumbs up if you happen to personally have some scientific illustration tattoos. I know you're out there. Yeah, great. So as we have seen, science illustration today continues to be an incredibly popular art form across, media and so many different avenues, and it has in no way lost its relevance to humanity. So I hope that as you view this exhibit, you can find a piece of art that speaks to you, that sparks your curiosity, and that maybe teaches you something new. And again, I am so excited to welcome you all to view this exhibit in both its virtual and physical forms. And I look forward to seeing you at the museum again soon. Very soon, you'll see my smiley face at the desk most days. And with that, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Felicia Van Stoke, who's going to share a few words with us before we open things up to a Q&A period. Take it away, Felicia.
Thanks, Liz. I'm so excited. I can tell that the staff and artists are excited too. This is one of my absolute favorite traditions at the museum. It's such a wonderful way to celebrate the beauty of nature and to see the world through someone else's eyes, through the artist's eyes. It's also just been so energizing to prepare this exhibit and picture welcoming people back to the museum after over a year of being closed. It has also been pretty gratifying to be able to apply the lessons learned from the past year to create a virtual extension that is really complementary to the in-person experience. So for visitors to the museum and online guests alike, there's just so much to explore in both realms. So I really hope that you take advantage of both opportunities to explore the science illustration with the videos, how-to guides, and even lesson plans that are available. Art of Nature just really exemplifies a value that we hold dear at the museum, which is that there are many ways to connect to nature and many ways to practice science. And in fact, when Megan accepted the Laura Heacox Naturalist Award, she expressed so beautifully how being an artist really is like being a scientist and vice versa. Both artists and scientists have a talent for noticing things, appreciating patterns, pulling out those details that make meaning. And they also can sit in observation and then find that way to express meaning to others through their media, whether it's graphs and data or graphics. This art form and science both celebrate the power of noticing, which is something that everyone can do. So what my hope for visitors and people who see this exhibit is that they are inspired to find the artist and the scientist within themselves. I know that I'm always inspired to make art and to make more observations every time this exhibit comes through the halls. It's just really a great reminder to open your eyes to the world around you. So with that, I'd really like to thank the sponsors listed here who have made this exhibit and experience possible. We have Santa Cruz County Bank, Ecology, Harry and Mary Blanchard, and the Hyatt family, who all of whom have been longtime supporters of this exhibit. I'd also like to thank the many members and donors who have supported the museum and even joined during the last year. Your dedication truly does keep us going, which is why tomorrow we are very happy to welcome back our members as a thank you for their support to be the first to enjoy this exhibit, as well as other refreshed exhibits, permanent exhibits that we've been working on throughout the closure. Hopefully when you walk in, even after being gone for a while, it'll feel both familiar and new and exciting as well. And just as a reminder, member days start tomorrow and run for a week. You can make a reservation for your time slot, or you can come on by for a walk-up visit. And then the following week, starting April 17th, we'll be fully open to the general public to enjoy this 33rd exhibition of science illustration with the Art of Nature. I can't wait for all of you to enjoy it. And it looks like now we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah. So if anyone joining us has any questions for the artist or for staff, you can write them in the chat. And I thought I'd also just take a moment to screen share really quickly what we've been talking about. So this is some information about the exhibit. So we do have some programs coming up after tonight. We've got a demonstration with one of our featured artists, Maria Cecilia Freeman. She's going to do a demonstration of her arts, her rose studies, which are beautiful, and she has a real deep understanding of that particular family. And then we are going to launch our Makers Market series May 1st, and I believe Sammy and Megan both are going to be there at that one, and I think also at the June one. You guys just can't get enough of being outside with others, I guess. And those are going to be really fun programs where if you've come to the museum in the past for our First Friday events for the Art of Nature with like the best, those are my favorite events of the year. This will be kind of like our version of that, but outside. So you're going to be able to see, I think each month we've got 8 artists who will be outside doing demos, and then you can also support the artists by purchasing some of their work. And the museum will also be open at that time. So a great time to come on by and further learn from these artists in person. And for all of our in-person offerings, whether it's admission to the museum or an outdoor event, we're maintaining masks, distancing, all of that jazz, and more information is on the website for each of these events. And then, as Liz mentioned, Dr. Juniper Harrower is going to be giving a presentation in May where she's going to talk about her research at Joshua Tree and share more about those beautiful images that we have of hers in the show. And those are exclusively in the virtual exhibit too. So another good excuse to go to that exhibit. And then I'm going to give you your sneak peek right now. So this is the virtual exhibit. And we have made the link live, so I'll share the link with you all so that you get the first sneak peek. But this is kind of a taste. How far shall I scroll? I don't know. When will I stop? Maybe now with Megan's. How about that? But if you go down all the way to the bottom, actually, this is where you will find, sorry, this is probably giving you all migraines, our supplementary materials too. So there's lots of videos that you can watch, as well as lesson sequences and activities. So I'll be sharing links to all of those things in a follow-up email. But yeah, do we have any questions tonight? Let's see. I don't think I see any in the chat. I had a question. Personally, I was jotting down frantically as Megan and Sammy were talking, because I loved everything that you all presented today. And I guess for both of you, you've both gone through the science illustration program. Megan when it was at UC Santa Cruz, and Sammy when it was at CSUMB. And I'm wondering if you guys could just like briefly share a little bit more about that experience and what you learned and what it meant to you.
Go ahead, Sammy. You're more recent than me.
Yeah, I would say my experience with the program was very short-lived. I feel like within the 1 year that I was a part of the program, and then like the 2 summers that I took classes, for as short as it was, I feel like it was really packed full of like knowledge and learning. I feel like even with like the 2-week courses in the summer, which is open to the public, so anyone can take it, I feel like even within that 2 weeks, I learned so much about, not only the different techniques that go into science illustration, but people from like all over the world are coming for, to learn. And I don't know what the program is going to be like this year, but I know last year due to the pandemic, it was virtual. So even if you're not able to go down to Monterey for 2 weeks, like maybe this year you can also do it from the comfort of your home. Personally, another thing I really loved about the program is that not only does it teach you the different art styles and techniques on how to illustrate something, they do a really great job at teaching you how to, kind of be your own small business, and like how to, value and price your work, and, just overall like understand like your own value and that you are valuable as an artist. And like, you're going to graduate school to learn this extra skill. So, you're valuable and you're worth it.
Yeah, I would just add all of those things. Yes, absolutely, Sammy. I will add that I gained a lot of confidence in my skills. I have a background in art, in fine art. That's my undergraduate degree. I've always also really loved science, but I never, so the program really gave me the opportunity to kind of take my art skills to another level that I just didn't have before. And that confidence has been the most it's the longest gift, right? It just continues into, into the present for me. And then the other thing I think I'll say is that all of us are required to also do an internship to finish our degree. And so mine was at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which was like my very first choice. I really wanted to go there, and I applied early because I thought they would never take me. And when they did, I was really surprised, but also just so honored. And being there was an incredible experience. And everybody I know who's been through the program, their internships have just been such a great learning experience. It's a great professional experience, kind of making connections with with an institution and with professional scientists or researchers or other artists or whatever, depending on your the context. And so that part was especially meaningful, and my relationship with the lab at Cornell has continued, and they are great supporters of artists. And I mean, as many of you may know, and they've supported many of students in the program. And so, yeah, that part was just, it's indescribable. I mean, I had access to their whole ornithology collection. They just let me handle their specimens, some of which were prepared by some of the most famous ornithologists in the world. And I was just like, it was just amazing. And just to have the relationships with the folks there have just been, just incredible. So
I'm a little curious, and I know that we've got a question in the chat too, but I'm just bouncing off of that. I'm curious about both of your experiences working with scientists, because you were just saying that, you were able to work with this institution, this organization, and look at their collections. But do you have any other insights into what it's like to be hired on as a science illustrator, to communicate someone else's work with the public? Can you share an example of what that's been like?
Yeah, so I would say for me, like Megan said, we do have to complete an internship. And so I actually completed 3, and 2 of them were with museums, one at the Burke Museum, and then I also interned at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. And for both of those, I definitely worked with scientists there. I actually worked with both malacology curators at each one, but even though they all focus on mollusks in general, the projects that I worked on were vastly different. So at the Burke Museum, we just kind of focused on mollusks as a whole, and I created a piece for them that just kind of showed the biodiversity of mollusks and what it entails, because a lot of people don't realize that an abalone and an octopus and a clam are all within the same group, which is very fascinating. And then at the Bishop Museum, not only was I working with the malacology curator and collection manager, she was also the lead researcher in Hawaiian land snails. And so for her, I worked on a educational piece to kind of show the importance and diversity of Hawaiian land snails, which if you haven't looked them up yet, I highly recommend it, because these snails look so cool. And now it is my mission to go to the Hawaiian Islands and find all of these little tiny snails.
I'm Googling now. Megan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so this is actually an experience from the Lab of Ornithology. So my project there was a identification guide for North American hummingbirds. And so I painted 13 species, 3 individuals from each species, so 39 total paintings. And it took me like 12 weeks. And so at the end of those 12 weeks, I had done all the design for the poster. So I had done all the arranging, all the paintings were done, everything. And we put a test print up. We like printed a test print. You know, they have these really awesome facilities. We put it up in the office and on a Friday, and I came back on Monday and it was covered in corrections. And I was like, oh my God, okay. The paintings are done and they had been reviewed, like the sketches have been reviewed, like, you know, but there are experts, many experts in a place like the lab. And so I was kind of horrified and like, okay, I didn't really know what to do, but the person who runs the program said, we sat down with the covered, you know, like 100 comments or whatever it was. And we went through and he was like, okay, well, yeah, you probably need to fix that one. And, you know, we worked it out. So I ended up repainting, I think 2 or maybe 3 birds out of 39, which was pretty good compared to what I was thinking I was facing. And it was just a really good learning experience. And when I left, I asked my boss, like, you know, the person who was in charge of the internship stuff, I said, hey, can I take that test print? And she's like, why? God, it was horrible. And I said, no, that was a really good lesson for me. It was really helpful. And so I took it with me. She let me take it because she's like, yeah, I don't want it. And so it was just a really good learning experience and a great reminder that like, just because you think you're done, like, no.
Yeah.
But it was a good process.
Like you're making work for an institution too, maybe,
right.
Or for a scientist or a researcher who has their own goals for it too.
Right.
Just like, you know, that process of making sure that you're on the same page with them. It seems like a big part of what you all do.
Well, and they, you know, it's their reputation. Like they are the premier ornithological organization in this country and arguably in the hemisphere. And like it can't be wrong, you know? And so it was fair. I mean, it was really fair, but it was such a good experience. And I mean, of course, in the moment I was just horrified, but it all worked out. And I'm really, you know, everyone was very pleased with the poster, or at least no one said anything once.
Well, and I know like one of the things that I think of with you, Megan, is that you really do pay a lot of attention to these details from a very like, from an accuracy standpoint. You have your own artistic style that I would say is like, maybe not, to me, it's like not as entirely like trying to get every single detail of every single thing, but you are like super, super concerned about the organism that you're depicting and like viewing it from kind of like a naturalist standpoint. So I'm sure that's probably very deeply rooted in that experience.
Yeah, that was definitely formative.
Yeah. I want to share a couple of questions from the chat too. So this one's from Nanda, I believe, or Nanda. And they write, does it sometimes feel like a lost art to draw and use simple tools, but do you find it satisfying to work by hand more than relying on programs to construct an image? Or do you find yourself leaning into the faster way you can work with digital media? So is it that like one is faster than the other? Can you either of you share like how those two are distinct for you?
Yeah, so I work with both. And honestly, I didn't know any digital art whatsoever until like I took one of the science illustration summer courses, like probably like 3 summers ago now. And even then, like after taking that course, I didn't really touch Photoshop or Illustrator just because it's a huge learning curve. If you're like really comfortable with like traditional, like it's just like a completely different medium. It's not just like you take a pencil and you draw it on a screen. Like it's completely different formatting. And then like just recently, I also just got an iPad to get Procreate. And even though I think I'm well versed in Photoshop and Illustrator, like this program is just completely different. I'm definitely like looking up all the YouTube tutorials right now to get comfortable with Procreate. So I would say like in a way, in a way, digital can be easier than traditional in some, ways, like if you want like clean lines. However, you have to learn how to get those clean lines, and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I would say like they both are very time consuming. I know like personally some of my Photoshop pieces take way longer than if I were to do them like with paint.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. I don't feel like I'm working in the, in the 20th century or the 15th century or whatever. I feel like, the traditional mediums are still very much alive, and I think people still really respond to the evidence of an artist's hand. I tried working in digital, and I just couldn't do it. It's so frustrating to me. And I've tried to keep my skills up, and I find it takes me way longer to do something digitally often than it does to do it by hand, because I'm familiar with the hand tools, and I feel very much in control of them. So they are different though. And certainly there is really good reason to do things digitally. I mean, I think if I had done those hummingbirds digitally and they had said like, change all these things, I'd have been like, okay, instead of being like, oh my God. So they're just, it's a different set of skills. It's a different set of tools, and there's pluses and minuses to both for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's easy to think that that it's harder to create in like maybe a more traditional form, and that computers are these tools that are supposed to make our lives easier, right? And so therefore, if you make something with a computer, then it's like cutting corners. And there are some aspects of it that are like you can just like take this color and fill and whatever, but it's like definitely its own skill set and its own form of art, and there are so many people out there who have this just like amazing mastery of it. And the pieces in our show that utilize that medium are like the skills that go into that are very impressive. And I just love that there are artists out there who do both. Like Sammy, you've got amazing pieces that are in scratchboard or watercolor or digital. And I know there are many other artists, like Andrea Dingledine's one of the ones who comes to mind, who I know works graphically a lot and also has watercolor and things too. And we have another question that came up from Cara that is, do you find yourself working more from photographs than live specimens during the pandemic? And how does it compare to live material? So like, has the pandemic changed what you have access to, and like how you go about your work?
I would say not too much. One thing, I do work from photographs a lot. I try to take as many of them myself as I can. But the treasure trove of the internet is just endless. And it's incredible how much is out there and how many resources there are. So I do rely on that quite a bit. I do draw from life often. One thing though that is really challenging is that living things move, even trees and plants, and it's really hard to draw from life. And so it's fun. It's a fun challenge. But if I'm really trying to get at a detail or understand some piece of anatomy or some feature, the image file library that is the Google is just invaluable to me. Of course, like I do also, I use the museum's collections, and of course I haven't been able to do that, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that, because especially like botanical specimens can be really they can be very, very helpful, especially if I need a root structure or a plant structure and it's springtime and I can have flowers but not seeds, or whatever. So so it's changed a little bit, not significantly though.
What about you, Sammy?
Yeah, I would say I mostly work from photographs, and I would say like one of the challenges that a lot of science illustrations require is that unless you are asked to specifically, like, unless you're asked to illustrate like one specific like organism, like for the most part, you kind of have to try and generalize it. And so if you're doing like live sketches as like a final piece, it might not necessarily be like accurate, like scientifically accurate, only because like, take for example, your individual just had some type of strange color morph, and it doesn't necessarily happen generally. Or if you're looking at a museum organism and say like it might need a little touch up, or you know it's gotten a little sun faded, like it might not look like when it looks like, you know, what it would look like if it were alive. And so I think the beauty of like having, you know, Google and the internet available is that you can collect all of these photos and save them. I also have like a huge like treasure trove and probably need an extra hard drive just for my reference photos. And so, you know, with all of those photos, it really helps to, you know, kind of help generalize and see different organisms and how to generalize them. However, I would say the issue with the internet is not everything is as what it seems. So like if you're looking at a specific plant and, you know, on Google or like Facebook, someone's like, oh, it's this plant. And then you like kind of perceive like, okay, this is the correct plant. And then you realize later on that it is not the correct plant, then, you know, you kind of have to keep fact checking yourself. One thing that I did learn from the program is that scientists and experts are so friendly. Like they are willing to like just give out their knowledge because they like find like, especially if you're like doing something as specific as like a certain species of June bug found in like the Californian desert. Like if you can find like someone who studies that specific organism, you know, feel free to email them, feel free to reach out and say, hey, I'm working on this project. Can you help me fact check it and make sure like everything is where it's supposed to be? And so, you know, they're really friendly. Scientists are, you know, I think for the most part, they're really interested in like, oh my gosh, someone's interested in my life's work of this bug, like amazing, like let me just share all my things. So I think, you know, that's just fantastic. And you know, what better way to connect with them than over the internet, you know? And so if you can send an email in 5 minutes, you know, hopefully like worst case scenario, they don't email back, but you know, who knows, they might be busy and you can just politely pester them and say, hey, you didn't answer my email, and just put this back up at the top of your inbox.
Great point. Great tip. And thanks for the permission to keep pestering. I'm wondering, Liz or Felicia, do you have any questions for Megan or Sammy? We're getting past our hour.
I just want to thank them both for sharing so much more about their process and the program and kind of the full picture of what it means to be a science illustrator. It's a complex and beautiful art form. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. It's, yeah, none of the rest of us have that insight here on the exhibits team. So having your voices here is really powerful.
I heard all of that. And I guess I'll just wrap up by sharing that I have officially put the link to the virtual exhibit in the chat. And so you guys can click on that. You can open it up. You can explore the virtual exhibit. It is live. The best time of the year is upon us. I'm also going to leave another link in the chat, which is if you wanted to become a member of the museum. Never has there been a better time. We've got lots of member perks, lots of member programs. Next month, we'll have our member meetup where we all get together and explore different parts of Santa Cruz. We're going to look for wildflowers at Mima Meadow. And what could be better than that? You could bring your sketchbook with you, you know, get inspired by the exhibit, then go out and look at flowers. All right, so again, I'll be following up with an email with some other links. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I see a bunch of artist names, Vance and Stephanie, and who else do you see?
Kathy and
Kat, yeah,
Kylie.
Aaron. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. We can't wait to see you back at the museum when you're comfortable. And hopefully we'll see you at the makers markets outside too. So yeah, thank you everyone.